But all right. So every time I do one of these interviews, I lie to myself and tell me I'm going to be more professional. But this time I'm going to try to actually be a little bit more professional. Starting with the most important thing is, would you introduce yourself and introduce your Patreon for anyone who is watching this video?
Yeah. My name is Stormi Withers. I am the artist and sole proprietor, whatever you call it, of What the Hellemental Creations on Patreon. And I've been modeling for about 8 months, 10 months, I think.
Nice.
Started with realistic Pokemon. Let's see.
Yes, I did see a couple of those, and they were awesome. That's my dog flapping his ears in the background.
Oh, I
So
love him.
that's what he does.
He's a good dog.
So there are a couple of questions I will try to pepper in that I try to ask all artists, just to
Yeah.
have some semblance of. I've already forgotten the word, but you know that thing where you try to do the same thing consistently because it adds, a thing. I don't know, but there's a word for it. But yeah, so what was it originally that got you into modeling?
Honestly, I started with painting miniatures and then I got myself a 3D printer because I didn't want to pay for shipping and wait for the miniatures to show up
Yeah.
from Etsy all the time. And then I just couldn't find a lot of the models and things that I wanted. So I downloaded Blender and started doing it myself. But I've been doing like character design for fantasy characters and Dungeons and Dragons characters for most of my life without actually doing anything like um, official with it. So this has been a nice endeavor.
Awesome.
Been
That's
trying to capture um, underrepresented cultures and their fantasy settings and mythologies in my sculpts lately.
That's right. We were talking about that because I got really, really excited about your. I believe it was a storm elemental that you sent me pictures of, and I was very, very excited to see that.
Yeah, that guy was a labor of love. I loved Karaktarik, the Elder Tempest,
Yeah.
part of July's or June's release, which was an African fantasy setting,
Hmm.
and took a few like well-known monsters and stuff like hippogriffs and displacer beasts and things like that. Sorry, phase cats. We can't say displacer beasts. Sorry, wizards. Um, but and then griffins and things like that and took an African spin on them with like creatures that live in the savannah.
Hmm.
So there's a girastrich for the hippogriff, which is a large giraffe ostrich hippogriff flightless thing.
Yeah, I remember looking at you were sending me some pictures while you were working on those, and I was getting really excited because I love that idea. I love the idea of creating a a sense of realism to a world and kind of expanding upon mythology to sort of grow and build on this fantasy setting. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's been nice to explore different things, and I'm learning a lot about different mythologies in the process because I'm trying to do them justice. And
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot out there. Like, I'm probably not going to get this right, but I do believe that a good chunk of the stereotypical fantasy settings that we have comes from, I believe it's Norse legend. Like a lot of trolls and things will come from
yeah,
more Scandinavian roots. There isn't, when you really start to get into it, there is a whole plethora of different things, whether you're looking into like a more like Shinto mythology or things like that. There's a lot out there that people don't end up having, as that doesn't in general just doesn't have as much exposure, but is deeply either terrifying or just amazing. Like, if you've never looked it up before, anyone who's listening, look up the Nuclevi. It is a terrifying creature. I think I want to say it's Scottish, but it's horrifying. And again, it's one of those weird things that at some point, someone many years ago decreed that any horrible creature you come up with has to have weird, inconvenient weaknesses. And the weakness for the Nuclevi is that it can't cross flowing water. So you're pretty much safe as long as you can get to the other side of a lake and then just, I guess, move to the other side of the lake whenever it comes to get you. But
Just let your hose go.
yeah, yeah, I don't. It's such a creepy creature, but things like that, or some of the oldest lore that you can find on vampires say that they're supernaturally compelled to count things. So one of the defenses to stop a vampire was to put a large amount of beans inside of your doorways, so that if a vampire came in to murder you, it would have to stop and start counting beans instead, and you would have time to run away. Which I think is just really funny. Like this terrifying creature, and it's there going 1, 2, 3, quick, run away.
Fantastic. Love that stuff.
Yeah, I love different cultures and different lore, and it's really cool to find multiple creatures from different cultures lore that has very similar crossovers, but they're slightly different. But yeah, so I really appreciate that idea of kind of digging into different cultures or different regions and finding the really cool, less popular but still really cool creatures and lore, and even some environments. I can't remember the exact details, but I know Will of the Wisps actually have kind of a creepy connotation that goes along
Oh
with
yeah,
the swamps and stuff that they live in. So like even just environments are really cool too.
yeah. One thing that I really enjoyed about like the Pokemon world building is that a lot of the ghost types were creepy
Mm.
as all heck, like terrifying. And some of the lore, they would snatch children, all that kind of stuff. So that's a big part of why I created the realistic Pokemon for a while, was that you know, their lore really fits in well with a gritty like D&D setting, especially with like some of the exaggerated temperatures and things like that that these things have.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
all of my Pokemon designs are actually available for all of my supporters all the time on my Patreon.
Nice.
Yeah,
I've seen a couple of them and they are pretty awesome.
thank you.
But so we talked about D&D a couple of times. Another thing that I like to talk to artists about is what's your general experience with D&D? Is it something that you have played often? Have you been doing it for a long time? Recently got into it?
So it's been something I've been vicariously involved in for a long time. I actually played my first 2 sessions in the last month, um, playing a Humblewood campaign with a little raccoon artificer. It was a delight. But I grew up reading the Salvatore books, like the Dritz novels, and just kind of always loved the fantasy realm and the fantasy setting and wanted to play games, but never found consistent groups or people like, friends. Like,
Yeah.
you're supposed to have friends, but they're hard to find.
Yeah.
I was working 60 hours a week at Amazon up until they sacked me. And
Oh, Amazon.
those buggers. But yeah, it's I've been doing this full time, and it's been quite not exactly lucrative, but definitely rewarding.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I mean, creating something of your own design and being able to see a return on that is really cool. But that is a fairly common issue with D&D in general. Right now, my schedule, I'm desperately trying to get a campaign together because my creative outlet is I just really like world building. Like D&D is I really love being a DM and just in general world building, and I am hoping to get a campaign going soon and get some people out to play a consistent game, every other week or something like that. But it's just so hard to find the time and fit schedules together, and then to find people who aren't involved in other games or just have enough interest to make time for it can be a chore, and it can be really frustrating to try to make it happen.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely been seeing. There's plenty of memes about it.
Yeah.
And we got two sessions in before like summer scheduling messed it all up, and it was an online session to begin with. So
Yeah. Yeah. You really can't make it, once it's online, you really can't make it much more convenient than that, unfortunately.
yeah, no, it's pretty great. The only downside of online is you don't get to use the minis.
Yeah. Well, there are some workarounds with that, but I haven't found any that are quite as engaging as having minis, in real life.
Well, one of the Kickstarters that I'm intending or that I'm working on, I don't have enough detail with to give all of it. We were planning on including files for Roll20 for the miniatures as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that way they can be used online as well, especially with the pandemic being on and off as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's awesome. I'm always really excited to see whenever artists try to find different ways of adding more value to their models that doesn't necessarily mean creating more models to sell or more models, to be released weekly, because that gets really daunting for artists, and I hate seeing that whenever an artist, they're super stressed out because instead of making 3 models a month, they're trying to do 5, or instead of 5 they're trying to do 7 or whatever, and they're getting really stressed out because they can't keep up with that. So I'm always really appreciative when I see other ways that are a little bit I don't want to say easier, but less stressful for them to kind of find a different avenue to add some more value to their releases. And that's one that I think is a really cool one, like stat blocks, and just in general coming up with other ways of interesting interesting ways of highlighting their models that doesn't necessarily come around, with a decorative base or something like that. Coming up with a more unique approach or just more value in general, I think is really great.
Yeah, it's been. Sorry, 1 second. I got a little distracted here.
It's fine.
Computer technical issues.
But that's awesome. I'm glad that you're at least able to kind of play occasionally. It's surprising to
Yeah,
me how many artists that I've talked to. I think I've done a couple, I'd say around 6 or 7 of these episodes now. Which, if
yeah,
if anyone watching doesn't know, this series that I'm doing interviewing artists is called Making Monsters, because typically that's just kind of when you think about creating stuff for D&D, it's usually a monster. But but anyway, I've interviewed I think 6 or 7 artists now, and it's surprising to me how few of them have actually played D&D.
yeah.
It's
That's kind of surprising to me as well. I've assumed I was like an outlier with my like lack of experience in it.
No, yeah, it's a I think I'm trying to remember who I was talking to. I think it was Manuel Boria told me that he's never played D&D, and I could be wrong. I'm sorry if I am. My brain's a little frazzled right now, but I think I was talking to him, and he had said that he had never played it before, and I was like, that's so weird. Like like when I think of D&D, I think of all these like beautiful models that I see all of you artists creating, and all I can think about is getting them on the table, and building an adventure around them. And it's so weird to think about the people who are making these models never really using them for that purpose, because that's so natural for me. It's so ingrained in my understanding of the way that you use these models that it's just crazy to
Yeah,
me.
and with his like extreme knowledge of like the D&D classes and aesthetic, I would have assumed that he was like well up in there.
Yeah, like I said, I could be
Like,
wrong. I'm pretty sure because he was actually, I think, one of the first artists that I interviewed for this actual series. He might have been the first.
oh,
And I think when I was talking to him, like I said, it was a revelation. But it's interesting. But I do love, like, I love seeing the different styles that somebody can come up with, despite not having a general idea for what these models will be used for. Obviously, you can get inspiration from anything. So I guess that's another a good segue to move into what would you say is like a consistent inspiration for you, or what has been like a more recent inspiration for maybe this release?
Well, um, what is it? RJ Palmer is an artist who did a lot of realistic Pokemon back in the day, and he kind of inspired his work kind of inspired me with a lot of my old designs. I've been kind of working on realistic Pokemon for the last 10 years, at least as a side hobby in some kind of like fashion or other.
Nice.
But and then as far as inspiration for the newer things, there was this Atlas Animalia thing that I came into by Sarah Dollinger, and she did a bunch of different designs of different creatures and monsters from different biomes and such, and I was really inspired by that. And a lot of fantasy is, like you were saying, pretty Eurocentric,
Yeah.
and the creatures and the designs are based off of usually pretty like familiar things for like a Eurocentric place. There's not a lot of variety. Like when you see like Griffin models and things like that, you don't see a whole lot of different variety in the Griffins.
Yeah.
Um, I have definitely that's actually a big part of what got me into starting this new avenue. I wanted to make a whole bunch of Griffins. I was going to do a Kickstarter or whatever, but I ended up just putting them all in my welcome box.
Oh, okay.
Made a bunch of dumpster Griffins, like raccoon Griffins, pigeon rats. I made a peacock and a penguin as well,
That's amazing.
and they're a lot of fun. And it's just a lot of fun to imagine the like evolutionary branches that would happen in a world where these kind of creatures appear naturally.
Yeah.
A lot of them are explained away with magic and stuff, like, oh, this crazy wizard mixed a horse and an eagle together, and what do you know? We got a hippogriff. But like,
Yeah. That's a really cool way of looking at it, and I've thought about it. I've thought about certain aspects of the I don't want to say inbreeding. I guess crossbreeding would be the proper term for that. But you have like minotaurs and you have centaurs and like you have mermaids, and what happens when there's some intermingling there? Like, do you end up with eventually down the line, is it just a person? Like, is it just a regular person who gets the person half of both sides of this lineage,
right?
and somebody who gets to be the lower half a fish and the upper half a bowl? Like, that would be kind of inconvenient.
Yeah, that would kind of
So
sounds like a Capricorn right there.
so
Little sea goat.
I like the I like the idea of kind of furthering that thought process out and kind of coming up with a little less ridiculous, but I mean, it's a fantasy world, nothing's ridiculous.
Yeah,
But
everything's ridiculous. Nothing is.
yeah, but I like the idea of kind of coming up with another more explained and more rich lineage of these creatures, and kind of coming up with different, not necessarily different species, but different types. Yeah, like I think that's a really fun idea.
Yeah, it's been quite enjoyable to do the little exercises and stuff with the mental exercises to figure them out and figure out how they would work and
Yeah,
like how the parts fit.
yeah, because I mean, it can be difficult to kind of just like how you need to kind of have a basic understanding of anatomy to make your models look real and not immediately set off some kind of a weird red flag in the back of your mind when you look at it and think like, something about that doesn't look right. And like, you can't put your finger on it at first, but it's because, the torso is a little too long in proportion to the head, or something like that.
Yeah,
Having a basic understanding of anatomy for different animals and humans in general is really helpful. You can also further that and go into a less concrete idea of understanding a fantasy creature's biome, to kind of understand some of its physicality, to understand whatever it might be, whether it's a dragon that you're talking about, or you're looking at some kind of a creature that lives in the mountains, and its skin would be a little rougher if it lives on the outside of the mountain versus something that might live at the very peak of the mountain might have a very light frame to be able to deal with you know lower oxygen levels or something like that. Like coming up with, it's a bad example, but still, like coming up with an understanding for why a creature's physicality would be constructed the way that it is based on its environment is also a really cool idea that goes along with that the same principle of thought where you have to have a decent understanding of anatomy, or at least a general understanding, and something to reference to be able to
That was actually a huge part of the mental exercises that went with the Pokemon endeavor.
oh, awesome.
Was like trying to turn those like really basic geometric shapes and designs into living, breathing kind of like creatures that made sense in a like magical or like non-magical setting. Like there was the Ghastly and Haunter Gengar line.
Hmm.
I made those all owlbears, like small little like pygmy owlbears. It's an interesting take on them, but
Yeah.
like a lot of ghost stories come from things being misunderstood and misheard in the woods.
Yeah.
And things having like defense mechanisms or something, or display mechanisms that like make them scarier than they are.
Yeah.
So these pygmy owlbears were really it was a fun exercise, and I did it because it was one of my friends' favorite D&D monsters and their favorite Pokemon. So
That's
I
awesome.
decided to try and play with that together, and it was a lot of fun. And then like the Oddish line, those are just the plants, like the little balls with
Mm.
the plants on their heads. I turned them into like symbiotic crab creatures.
Okay.
So they were like little crabs with the plants and stuff that were growing on top of them. It was a fun take on it to make it as a like something that could actually move around and exist and not just look like a blob.
Yeah. Give it a little bit more definition, a little bit more. Uh, I hate to use the term realism, but I guess fantasy realism. That is,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
going
realism was
from,
the goal,
well, yeah,
like believability.
going from you're going from one fantasy realm to another, so you kind of have to bridge that gap a little bit. But that's a cool take on it. But I guess we should talk about the actual sculpting techniques that you use. And so you said you're using Blender, is that right?
Yeah,
Nice.
I've been pretty exclusively using blenders. I tried ZBrush out at the beginning, but it was a little bit too hard for me to figure out.
Hmm.
Just with everything else I was dealing with and like the workload I was under, Blender seemed to be a little bit more user friendly and it's free, so
Yeah,
can't go
and
from there.
there are quite literally. I know there's a lot of tutorials out there for ZBrush as well, but there are quite literally hundreds of very well done, very in-depth tutorials for Blender. So chances are, if you have any question along the way, you can probably find it. And for anyone who hasn't watched any of their episodes, I will reiterate that I have talked to a few artists now, and some people have said that Blender is a stepping stone to something else, but the general consensus that I think I've come up with has been that Blender is a really great way to get into this and start sculpting something without having to spend a ton of money, because some of these programs can be very expensive. And it can be a really, really great tool and be really robust, and you can make really great models. And there are people who have, successful businesses creating models using Blender, and it is a fantastic tool. I think that it all comes down to kind of your workflow and what you like to use, and if it's something that you find fits with your workflow well enough, or if you can make it work for you, then I think by all means go for it. And the fact that it's free is also really appealing, especially if this is something that you don't necessarily know that you want to do long term, or if it's something that you're just kind of playing around with, or if it's something you want to see, if you want to you have the knack for, or the excitement to stick with it, then I think Blender is a fantastic option.
Definitely. Um, like I haven't actually done any tutorials because I'm kind of bad at following along with the video.
So you're self-taught with all this.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. I did like physical sculpture for like a semester in college, and I've always had like a little bit of an understanding of three dimensions. I did architecture in high school for 4 years and was really good at that. I had like 150% in the class every year, but then college came around and stuck me in a beginner class, and I was just like, yeah. And then I dropped out of college. But
Well, I've got
we
you
do what we
beat.
do.
I didn't even go to college, so
Hey, man, good job. Didn't waste the money.
that's
Now, my
that's
my community college in SoCal had a zoo though, so I would go and like.
oh, that's so cool and weird.
It is pretty cool. Moore Park College, yeah, they had like this little zoo program that I would have loved to get into, but they only accepted like 10 kids a year into it or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
But they had a real cool turtle and some parkour foxes that were pretty fancy.
That is very cool. I mean, turtles in general are just pretty awesome.
They are fantastic.
So what's like your general sculpting process? Like, kind of give a general understanding or a general outline of kind of how you approach a model.
So I typically start with, um, you know what? Let's start with a freshie, well, a fresh thing here. Name a, I guess give me a prompt. That way I can show you how I start if you
Sure.
want.
Um, well, we talked about it. Let's do it. Let's like a mermaid goat.
All right. So we're gonna do basically the Capricorn.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All righty, cool. That's my sign. So I'm about it. I've been meaning to put one into one of my releases as well. I start with a like a ball,
Hmm.
and then I like shape it into whatever, like I was saying, whatever like motion I wanted. Oh wait, I turned on the symmetry. Good job. Need that symmetry. But what kind of fish do we want this Capricorn mixed with?
Ooh, that's a good question. Would it be ridiculous to say a swordfish?
No, I love it.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, cool. I'm pretty sure they have upright fins instead of like the little floppy like whale fins. So
Yeah.
kind of sharky. So I use mostly the elastic deform tool at the beginning on Blender,
Okay.
just to kind of build out the detail or the form, like the volume of it before I go into the details.
Just kind of get like your rough shape together.
Yeah. And then the grab tool is a useful one as well for placing limbs and horns and things like that.
Okay.
A little, not exactly the angle I want it. That'll do. And remesh it to make it a little easier. Okay, there's some limbs, some little extra fins and stuff because this is a good start.
Yeah, this is so cool. Like, I have such a hard time whenever I'm watching, somebody sculpt something like this. I have such a hard time remembering that I should actually be, engaging and talking to them while they're doing this. So I'm just like, whoa, as I watch this thing come together.
And then I'm using the crease tool to try to get a little bit of the more detail into the shapes.
Hmm.
Kind of frame out the skeleton a little bit of it.
Get some muscles going.
alternate crease to get the sharp edges.
Nice.
Control and then click. It took me a while to figure out some of these things. I know like none of the hotkeys to Blender. I'm still very novice to the actual tools.
Yeah, I mean I know I'm kind of the same way when it comes to like editing software. I know there's a lot of people who say, the hotkeys they're gonna like increase your efficiency by like 15 or 20%, and I'm like, yeah, that's great, but I don't have the time to learn that stuff right now. Like I just have to get this done. So,
Yeah, when I
but
was doing the Pokemon, I was making like 30 models a month
yeah, man,
because I was ambitious.
yeah,
Now um, I'm setting myself to 10 or 12 because I'm trying to put more effort into them, like more energy, and put a base in and a story with it, basically.
yeah, yeah.
Um, oh yeah, hey, cool.
I like it. I like
So
it. It's amazing to me that just such subtle lines and just making some subtle changes can completely redefine the way that this basic shape starts to come together, and it adds so much more depth or emotion or life to something by just adding a little bit more, like a crease here or just a little bit more of a longer line here. Like it's crazy to me, but it's just art in general, I guess.
it's definitely, I like how forgiving this medium is. I used to do mostly just pencil drawings. I could never really commit to like painting or
Yeah,
color or anything like that. But this is even more like forgiving than pencil because I can just undo.
yeah.
The problem though is when I forget to save,
Oh.
which is a thing I do often. Let me save this now.
Speaking of,
There we are. Hey, cool. But yeah, I've lost a lot of like full like some of my best work because I forgot to save it.
oh, that sucks. That's always so
It
heartbreaking.
does suck. It Yeah, not a fan. Oh, I don't like that. I don't. I do a remeshing every now and then to get the detail or more detail in
Hmm. Okay.
uh in the mesh. Oh, that's the wrong.
Okay, so I'm kind of learning this stuff a little bit. The one of my original goals with doing these interviews and kind of talking to all you artist folk was to kind of absorb your energy just a little bit at a time, and eventually get to the point where I could kind of start doing some of this myself, just for some of the hobby stuff that I want to do. I don't have any aspirations for anything more than that. But I'd love to eventually model just some of the things that I have kicking around in my head. One of them being my channel mascot, whose name is Orem, by the way. If anyone who doesn't know that,
That's the little character guy.
yeah, he's a swamp troll,
Okay.
and I had this idea a long time ago. Kind of, I mean, it's nothing new. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing, or Beast from X-Men, like this giant Hulk who's actually very much intelligent and but also a very awkward individual, and that's kind of how I ended up creating this NPC. And it was the first NPC I ever created, and it was the first NPC I ever printed a model for using a 3D printer and had in one of my campaigns. So it's kind of really special to me, and it has a lot of firsts when it comes to a lot of the stuff that I'm doing here on the channel and just in general. So I really wanted to make that character an important part of the channel. But I would love to eventually get to the point where I feel comfortable enough to actually sculpt him and give him away to either my supporters of the channel through Patreon or just in general or something. Because I would love to be able to get into that. So that's kind of I would say a soft goal to eventually kind of get to that point where I could do that. But so I understand a little bit of this stuff. Like I started to kind of learn it a couple of months ago, and then got a little sidetracked with life, as tends to happen. But so I understand when you say remesh, you're talking about creating a much more detailed topography so that you can pull things apart more and add more detail to something, because there's only so much you can manipulate a surface in Blender before you start to run out of a term that I can't remember.
Yeah, the vertices stop behaving.
That's the one.
Yeah, I don't know the technical words either. I'm not big on the jargons.
I was going to say marmalade. I don't know.
Hey, my cat's a marmalade. He's very good. Good little orange boy.
Yes, you can only spread so much marmalade on toast before you have to get another spoonful, I guess is the main bullet point of what I was trying to very clumsily outline there.
Well, that's apt.
Yeah.
It makes sense here.
But
There we go.
but yeah, so when you say remesh something, it's to give a little bit more detail so you can start. It's to get another scoop of marmalade so you can start spreading a little more on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is like, it's just so cool to me to watch just such subtle changes and like just to watch it come together like that. And I'm also gonna say that I'm really impressed that this is kind of just freehanding it without a reference, that just kind of going for it. And
Well, luckily, Capricorns are kind of a thing that I'm passionate about aesthetically,
okay.
being my sign and all. So it's not something I've done a lot of drawings and such of it, but I use references occasionally. I'll like add it to the back of the image, but mostly just to get the basic shape down, and then I kind of get rid of it because it's visually distracting.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, I guess, is that I never thought about that, but using a reference up to a point, because, using a reference, by definition, a reference is not something that you're going to make an exact copy of. Well, I mean, I guess not in this setting. But having a reference image, to kind of get the general shape of something down, or to make sure that you have just the basic outline or the basic features, and then making it your own at a certain point, to kind of getting rid of it, because it then becomes less of an inspiration to kind of help give you the general shape, and starts becoming something that's more specific, because you've gotten to a point where you get close enough, and then you can kind of have to start adding your own elements to it. But that's an interesting point that I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah. So like I had started with like the Pokemon, and their references were pretty much in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really get in the habit of doing it. It actually took me like months to figure out that I even could add an image into here, which makes sense
Yeah.
because like it's a fancy modeling program, but I'm not a fancy modeling person. I'm just, a modeling person. So,
You're fancy to me.
well, thanks.
Yeah.
I try to be fancy, at least to a point.
But yeah, I mean, Blender is crazy. The amount of stuff that you can do with it, it's not. I think when I first started getting into Blender, it was because I was trying to learn how to do video game assets, and I was at the time attempting to create my own video game, which I had a general understanding of what it was going to take. But when I got into it, I realized that creating your own video game as a one-person team it's not impossible. It's just really hard. Like, it's really
Gonna
hard.
take some time. Yeah, doing this as a one-person team, I'm seeing like trying to run this Patreon on my own and like
Yeah.
figure out advertising and all that kind of stuff without anybody doing renders or anything like that for me, or test prints or supports.
Yeah.
Definitely overwhelming. I'm grateful I got fired from my day job
That's an awesome way to look at it.
because there's no way I'd have time to do this if I had to work a regular job again.
Yeah, I completely understand. It's been I mean, I love the channel. I have an amazing time with it, just getting to know people, in the business side of things, and the artist side of things, and just even just the YouTube side. Like, I've made some friends from totally different channels that have nothing to do with 3D printing or modeling or painting or anything like that, that I consider to be really good friends, that that I just met through chatting about creating YouTube content. And it's difficult. It's hard to keep up with it, even with that level of passion and excitement. It's hard to find the time when you're, like you said, I'm working a 40-ish hour week, a little bit over sometimes, and then also I've got two young children that take a fair amount of time, and as children do. But I mean, I love them. They suck a lot of time and energy out of me. It's the somewhat nice, not nice way to put it, but it's just what kids do. So at the
They
end of the week,
they're
there's not that much time left. So I totally get that.
they're needy little vampires. What are you gonna do?
Yes, but then they smile and they hug you, and you're like, oh, I remember why I love you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I get that. Like it's hard when you get into something, and for me, I basically just gave up on all of the search engine optimization, or as it's better known, SEO. Like I just gave up because I tried to understand that, I tried to learn it, and I just was like, oh man, like this is like trying to do my own taxes. Like I'm getting a headache trying to understand this, and I just gave up. So I know enough to kind of get my content out there, but I realized that it wasn't really something that I wanted to spend the little bit of energy that I have. I didn't want to spend on that. So I focused on the things I do enjoy, and it's worked out pretty well because I mean, I'm having a good time with it and meeting a lot of really cool people. And that's what's more important to me than, having a video that goes to whatever metric you want to put on it or whatever. So I get that a lot. Like, looking into the back of house stuff, I guess you could call it, of running a Patreon or running a YouTube channel. Like it's hard. Like it's hard to find the time and the motivation to learn the stuff that's more of a mundane side of it whenever you're passionate about the other aspects.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, especially like the advertising aspect.
Yeah.
I've been doing this Patreon for about like since September
Hmm.
or August, I think, and managed now to finally hit 13 patrons.
Nice.
Most of them are good friends.
I
So
understand.
it's advertising is a challenge, but
Yeah. I
it's
it's hard.
it's a bad.
It's weird too because like I have a really hard time with advertising or with trying to push my content or my channel or any of that stuff because I kind of I have a hard time not feeling like a pest or feeling like I have a hard time talking about myself anyway. So whenever I'm online and I'm doing something with somebody else, and they're like, yeah, I saw a video a while back and it was this thing, and like there's me in the corner, with my red Solo cup while like the music is blaring and everybody's dancing, and I'm going, that's my video, yeah, that was mine, like, and I'm just too awkward to actually be like, oh, here's a link to my video. That's what I do, like, because it's weird for me, like it's I'm getting better about it, but it's always a little weird to talk about yourself.
Yeah, it can be. It can definitely be challenging. I obviously have been struggling to put words out throughout most of this little interview.
No, I mean, I think you're doing a fine job, especially considering you're talking to me and also doing this. I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs. So, I mean, kudos to you. But this is awesome for 45-ish minutes worth of work. This is amazing to come up with something that already has this much detail and this much, emotion and life to it, considering what it started out with was just a little blob. I guess it's how we all started out, really.
Yeah, right. And now we have all this little detail, and some of it's good.
Some of it's good. Just focus on the good stuff. But I should really. This is me saying that there's a way for me to be more professional next time, but whatever. Um, what's
Honestly, professionalism doesn't have to be part of your brand.
that's very true. You know what? I like that. I'm gonna put that somewhere. But I should have like a general list of questions that I like to ask. But I think another one that I do, D&D is really important to me, and like I said, it's so ingrained in these models. That's one that's really important, and I love to ask about. But just out of curiosity, like when you're working on a fairly complex model, start to finish, about how long do you think it takes you?
Depending on the model, like beasts and creatures I do a lot faster than like the humanoids.
Hmm.
Humanoids, that's kind of why I cut down to like 10 models a release is because I'm trying to release like characters and NPCs and stuff
Yeah.
with it as well. And like those will take me like a day, like all together or more, depending on how much work I want to put into them. Um, But when I was doing the Pokemon, they were coming out like 5 a day,
Oof.
just because I would just sit down and work on it and bust them out really quick. Just do the organic shapes like this with the organic sculpting.
Yeah.
But I also didn't have a whole lot of like the technical skill with it back then either.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them looked like a lot of them ended up looking a little more rushed, and I would end up having to like go back and like redo them. So like
Right.
that 20, 30 models a month, it really ended up being like 40 individual models that I would design in the month,
Yeah.
just until I got them right. But start to finish, like with this one, depending on how much like I want to get into it, and whether I want to do a base or something on it. This could probably be a 3 to 4 hour project.
Okay.
Could also be a 2 hour project.
Right.
Like it's coming along pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to decide if I would be relieved or horrified to see this in the ocean swimming towards me if I had like just been on a ship that got sunk.
It depends. Is it screaming at you?
That's a good question. Is it like got the
Because if
goats?
it's screaming at you, I think you might laugh a little bit. It's like good old goat screams are
They are
to
pretty
die
funny.
for.
Would add some much needed levity to the situation.
Kind of like picturing it as a fainting goat.
Which I guess is an evolutionary response, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like if I were a
Hey, we do
predator
it.
and I went
We're
to
people.
eat something and it fell over, I'd be like, "Oh, my job's done." Like
But like for people, when we get overwhelmed, sometimes we just go to bed about it.
that's a fair point. You know what? I guess if you're a fainting goat, get in contact and I'll see if I can make you a goat-sized bed. And then whenever you feel like you got to faint, I'll put you in your bed. You just go to bed about it.
That's awfully decent of you.
I try to be a decent person, especially to goats, because they're mischievous little monsters.
They're fantastic. Pygmy goats are some of my favorite little bastards, especially in pajamas.
I little known fact about me, I grew up on a farm that actually had Nigerian dwarf goats.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, they're pretty fun. They're about the size
Did
of
you
a
put them in pajamas?
some of them, not pajamas, but some of them we raised in the house and we put diapers on them.
Yeah, they don't know when they're pooping. They just do it.
They just do it. But they are about on par with your average dog when it comes to intelligence, and that is enough to get them into a lot of trouble because they're also really friggin' stubborn. So like they'll get their foot caught in a fence they try to jump over, and you'll get them unstuck, and then they get stuck again in 2 minutes because they want to try it again. Like just stubborn creatures, but also affectionate. So
Delightful beings. That's- All right. So I always end up waiting a little bit too late to detail out the feet and the limbs, and end up costing myself here and there, especially if I'm doing hands. And like if I've done like all the remeshing like up to a point, but I've forgotten to do the little hands, it's often a lot of going back and redoing things to get it right. This looks weird.
I don't know. I mean, I think it looks good.
I fixed it.
Got little flippers.
Yeah.
Seems like it'd give you a really uncomfortable high five.
A little floppy.
Very limp handshake. Which,
What?
I mean, I hate the idea that a handshake is supposed to be the judge of like you as a person. it's been ingrained in me from like movies and TV shows and books and everything else is that, like he had a very limp handshake and whatever. And like, it's just the old world view of like judging someone in like the fifth of a second it takes to shake their hand. And I hate it
Hey,
because I have giant hands. So typically when I go to shake somebody's hand, they're gripping my fingers because like they think that they've gotten to the total length of my hand or whatever, and they're, they grab my fingers, and I'm basically in like a curtsy position where I have to be like, it's nice to meet you, like it's just weird. And then I walk away being like, damn it, like I didn't give them a good handshake, they're not going to think I'm a good person now. Like,
see, I like to just go limp wrist when somebody I don't necessarily trust is shaking my hand. And that way they have like this weird clammy limp wristed like object in their hand.
it's amazing. I'll teach you to shake
Because
my hand.
because I'll teach you to judge me. This is a power play here. Watch it.
I'm gonna have to remember that for the next one. Well, I mean, I don't plan on shaking anyone else's hand for a long time
I
because,
mean, it isn't really the time for that.
no, I mean, we're in a world now where I don't have to worry about that anymore. So,
Bless.
you know what? There are some positives to, working from home and not having to see people, and that's one of them, is that I, don't have to see people.
Right?
Yeah.
I definitely have been getting a bit stir crazy. I try and get myself to like the local park every day
Hmm.
or do something, at least go buy a little bit more alcohol or something. I'm living on my own now for the first time in like my entire life. I just moved up here to Seattle from San Francisco on the 1st of June. What month is it? It's June.
June, yes.
Yeah. But my partner stayed in the Bay.
I did see
So
that in your posts on the old Facebook.
yeah, I tend to be open about my shit on the Facebook.
I don't think there's anything
But
wrong with that.
yeah, vulnerability isn't really a bad feature. It's
No.
actually one that masculine folks should open up to a little bit more.
Being human does not require a gender. Like, just being upset, being sad, being, having emotions is not dependent on any specific gender. Like, and I hate that idea that, people like the whole, big boys don't cry. Like, I want to be the guy who stands behind them and go, yes, they do.
Yes, they do. They certainly do, and it's healthy.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, you got good cats who climb up on top when you're crying.
Yeah. Or, a dog that just danced around your feet. He's like, what's wrong? What's going on? We go outside? That'll make you feel better. It makes me feel better. Let's go outside.
Also, that. Yeah, one of the things I miss most about my spot in the bay were all these raccoons and skunks and possums that would come out to our porch every night, and we would feed them dog food. And they would just hang out every night, tap on the window when it was empty. But I'm definitely a druid at heart.
It sounds like it.
I'm known to feed the raccoons in my underwear. It's okay.
It's fine. They won't judge you.
Nope. And if you do, I don't want to know you, so we're good.
Yeah.
See, what's this doing? Yeah, so that's coming along pretty well.
Yeah, I'd say so. For, a little less than an hour's worth of work, that's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Oh wait, it's swordfish. He's got like there's the swordfish vibe to it for sure,
Oh, yeah.
but I feel like he still needs like a little bit of a little bit of a weapon on his face. But he's got the horns.
He does. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I don't know. I mean, I like it. Sword goatfish. Just trying to decide, like, if you were, you saw this swimming in the water next to the boat, like, your first thought would either be like, man, I'm gonna have really good luck now, or man, I'm gonna die soon. Like, it's either an omen for good luck or probably death.
Well, it depends on what your goal is, because that could be both.
That's true. That's very true.
Do we like that? I don't know. Seems unnecessary, but it's there.
Well, I mean, that could be said about me. So, I like it.
Heck yeah, you're the swordfish Capricorn.
There he is. That's amazing. I feel like that was nothing. That was a drop of a hat and it was done. That's fantastic. Now, I mean, obviously, you could probably add more detail to this if you wanted to, but I'm floored that you were able to come up with something that looks this good that quickly.
Yeah, I'm definitely a workhorse. Um, I put them out pretty quickly. My sketches, I usually do detailed, like anatomical sketches in like 5 minutes, but I'm definitely a quick worker. But a lot of like detail and like fine-tuned stuff gets lost a little bit in the way along the way here and there.
Hmm.
Uh, Detailed clothing is a weakness of mine. I'm
Ah,
not great at designing it.
I've heard
Like most
actually.
of my first couple releases have been like um, more tribal clothing, so I don't have like I can like half like teach myself like slowly figure it out, but I haven't done a whole lot of like really cohesive clothing yet. But we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually heard that from a couple of different people that clothing is a frustrating one to work with. That and hair, I think, is another one that a lot of people have said is kind of
Hair
frustrating.
is rough. Yeah, I keep just doing like elemental kind of hair and stuff. Like with the one I was working on at the beginning of this, I'm giving her basically smoke plumes for hair
Yeah,
because she's a magma volcano elemental genasi type lady.
just makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah, perfect sense.
but yeah, well, I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. This was amazing. And just in general, I always love getting to know different artists that have a different take on things and have different ways of going about their craft. Like it's really fascinating for me to kind of see the different aspects that people bring to something like this. So I'm really glad that we were able to make this work out. I know we've been talking about it for a little while.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me on. It's been cool to like get to discuss it a little bit with somebody and like talk about the goal a little bit. I've been kind of isolated, so
Yeah, absolutely.
it's nice.
This is like I said, these I like just having a casual chat, and if other people enjoy it, that's awesome. And if they don't, then you're wrong, and that's fine.
Yeah, and you're allowed to be wrong.
Yeah, it's fine. Everyone's allowed to be wrong.
Everyone's entitled to their own opinion as long as it's the same as mine.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, this is awesome, and I'm so glad we were able to make the time for this.
Likewise. I might throw this guy in my July release.
You should, and I will post. I'll post links whenever that's up. I'll post links in the video for that, but I'll also post links up for your Patreon and really anything else that you would like the general public to see about your models or be directed to for your art.
Awesome. I don't have much set up in the way of like websites or anything yet. I've got my Patreon,
Of course.
but yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, I'll
Well,
get this guy up there. Probably everything. I usually have all the models up and supported by the first week of July or the first week of the month, I guess.
right.
They're all in July. That would be inefficient.
It's 1 month a year, guys.
You got this.
Well, you missed it. Sorry. Well, you got 11 months to wait. It's fine. We'll get there.
Yeah, there's multiple tiers. I have a daddy level at $1,500. If you just really like me and want to support my art, please sign up at the daddy level.
I gotta go balance my checkbook.
But yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun, and like I said, I really appreciate it.